Thank you for listening to the Luminous Recovery Yoga Podcast, hosted by Kari. The views and opinions expressed here are strictly those of the person who gave them. Take what you like and leave the rest. These views and opinions do not represent any specific 12-step program, only my experience, strength, and hope in recovering from the dis-ease of addiction and codependency. If you'd like to learn more, please visit my website at www.luminousrecoveryyoga.com. Hey, this is Kari. Thanks for joining me for the Luminous Recovery Yoga Podcast. I am so happy that you're taking the time to sit and listen and just take in what you take in today. See if any of this resonates. Before I get started, I want to make a plug for Yoga of 12-Step Recovery. If you are liking this podcast and you're finding it helpful, every week I teach/lead a meeting/class called Yoga of 12-Step Recovery. And it's sort of fashioned after this podcast. Well, actually, this podcast is fashioned after that class. In other words, there's a topic. I share on that topic my experience, strength, and hope. And then whoever else is there and wants to also shares on the topic. And then I lead you through a gentle, beginner-friendly yoga class that helps to embody the topic. So whatever the topic is, we bring that into our yoga class theme for that evening. It's a 90-minute class/meeting. We meet for 45 minutes and then we have a 45-minute yoga practice. So if you're finding this podcast useful, I would love it if you checked out Yoga of 12-Step Recovery, also known as Y12SR, and you could find a page for that on my website. I will link that in the show notes and in the description for this episode, and it's free. You can come and check it out and see if it might be for you. So if you're enjoying this podcast, I just want to extend that as another resource that you can add to your sustainable recovery toolkit. So with that being said, let's get going here today. So it's been a week. It always is. And, one of the things I love about this podcast is it really is a place for me to sort of reflect on the week and what's come up and what themes am I seeing and what struggles or victories am I having in terms of my recovery and, just where am I at? And this space is an opportunity to share that with you, because one of the things I've learned in recovery is that my thinking becomes distorted, and it really helps when I reason things out with somebody else. So sharing is one of the tools in my toolkit. When I share, when I'm honest, it helps me sort my thoughts, but I also find that when I share, other people can benefit from that. Just like when other people share, I often and always benefit from that. So I think that sharing is a really important piece of recovering, because it helps us reason out what's happening in our heads, because sometimes our heads can become cloudy, messy places. I know that's definitely true for me, that I can really talk myself into bad ideas and convince myself that they are good ideas. So when I reason things out with someone else, it helps to get some perspective. And one of the things I've really learned is that my body is my dashboard. My body generally lets me know if my brain is driving the bus or if my body is also in on what's happening. So in other words, if I have an idea and I'm getting signals in my body that this might not be a great idea, that's when I'm generally prompted to pick up a tool, whether that's recovery literature, getting my body to a meeting, calling a trusted program friend, calling a sponsor, or, taking a yoga class and just kind of like the Etch-a-Sketch, like just shake it up and, refresh the screen. So I shared a few episodes ago. I have an episode on grief. If you want to listen to that episode later, that is in the archive. And, this has been a really doozy of a year. I thought 2020 was bad. I thought 2021 was bad. And 2022 just really nailed it in. So it's been a really, I don't want to just say rough 3 years, because there have also been really amazing blessings that have come out of this pandemic and all of the other crazy shit that happens in the world. But it has really, really caused/forced me to work my program in new ways and to be curious about myself in new ways. And so there's been lots of change, and sometimes I love change and sometimes I do not love change. If the change benefits me, we love change. And if the change hurts my feelings, then maybe not so much. So sometimes the change really just depends on whether or not I feel like I'm benefiting from that change. And, you know, I'm a human, that makes sense, right? Like, we like the good changes, and the bad changes can maybe go F themselves. So, you know, I find myself, you know, it's interesting because I'm someone who can get very excited. Like, when things are good, I can get so amped and like, oh, I'm so excited. And the other end of that, the opposite of that, is like I can get equally excited, but in a way that I want to say could be more negative, right? Like, really passionately angry or rageful, or it's excited in the other way, right? There's like the happy excited, and then there's like the sad excited. And either way, I am excited, right? Like, I am amped up. And sometimes, you know, what I'm generally looking for is that middle path, the middle ground. Not black, not white, something gray, something in between, something that's not so extreme. So I do know about myself that I am excitable. So this week, I was feeling sad about some stuff. And I shared, like I said, in that grief episode, that I went through some breakups this year. And some of those breakups were good. And another one of those breakups really hurt, like in the sad, excitable way, like in a way that was just really devastating to me. I was very much loved somebody, and it turned out that we didn't have the same picture of where the relationship was going, and it seemed like the better thing to do was to end it rather than continue to invest in that relationship. And I guess it was mutual, you know, like, it was mutual in the sense that we both agreed that we didn't want the same things, and that we couldn't continue down that path knowing that we weren't headed in the same direction. And so it was mutually agreed upon that the best thing to do would be to end the relationship. And, you know, it's interesting, as I tell this story, I still get that tingle in my chest, like I could cry, but it's softer than it was, let's say, a couple months ago. So it's been several months since this breakup. But what I'm learning about grief is that it's like more circular, like it's not linear, it's not a straight line, it's really more of a circle, and that sometimes I'm just circling through and cycling through the different points. Like, in one day I could be both angry about it and sadly devastated about it. So it really can just kind of go through cycles. And then some moments I'm okay. And what's interesting is that in the moments where I'm okay, I think like, well, I'm better, great. Really waiting to be better, really waiting to get over this. And then within a couple of hours, I could be crying. So I have to constantly bring myself back to, like, there is no over this. This relationship will always be a part of me. Like, I will always have been changed, a different Kari through this relationship. Like, this relationship will always be, you know, all relationships are, everything I've been through, like, those always carry with me into the next relationship. And I'm always a different person. By the next relationship, I am somebody else, right? Because that's what happens in relationship, as we change. So I've been still going through the cycle of grief. And although it's not so sharp, you know, the edges aren't so sharp, but it's still there, and it's still, you know, lingers and cycles. So this week, I was feeling pretty low. I was feeling sad, and I talked myself into the idea that it would be a really good idea to send a text. Let's send a text. And so what's funny is I get out my thumbs and I get out my phone and I start drafting this text with my thumbs. And my head thought, this is a great idea, we should definitely do this. But I was getting signals from my body like, oh, this is sticky. Like, should we include somebody else in this situation? Like, in this scenario, like, who do we need to call? Should we reach out, maybe reason this out, see if this is really a good idea once we say it out loud to somebody else? So that's what I did. First I called my sponsor, And I talked to them about it, and then they suggested that I pick up the phone and maybe call somebody else too and get a little bit of another perspective. So I called another trusted program friend, and this person has a lot of experience in relationship. And, you know, what I came to out of this this conversation was a couple of things. One is that I was feeling really low. And what I wanted through this texting exchange that I wanted to initiate was I wanted a hit. I wanted to get high, right? Like I wanted to feel high for a minute because I was feeling low. But what I know about the experience of getting high is that there's always a come down, right? Like there's always that period after where it's like, okay, I got that tasty morsel. I want more. And when I don't get more, there's like this dropout period where I feel bottomed out. And I had this intuition that that's what was going to happen, is I was going to send this text, I would get a response. If the response was what I liked or didn't like, there would be a come down, right? Like I would, you know, the texting would end, or it wouldn't result in like, I love you so much, I want you back, right? Because that's the only real answer I want. Like, I love you so much and I want you back. And anything aside from that is actually not what I want to hear. So I had this awareness that I could act on this urge to send this person a text and tell them how much I miss them and elicit some emotion. But then afterwards, what would happen? And how would I feel after? And, you know, that's recovery to me. It's like the fact that I even have an awareness that something could happen after, rather than just being so struck in the moment that I don't even consider what the aftermath could be. But I did have this spark of understanding that there would be a drop. So I shared this with this trusted program friend. And what this person gave back to me was actually something I've been really contemplating, and it is it's really the theme of what I want to talk about today, which is the cause of suffering. The cause. So there is suffering. There are 4 noble truths to Buddhism, and this is kind of where I'm going with this. And I'm not an expert on Buddhism. There are people who know much more about this than me. In fact, one of my fave listeners, they are Buddhist, and so maybe I can talk more to them about this later. But the first noble truth in Buddhism is that there is suffering. It exists, and we all suffer. The second noble truth is the cause of suffering, and this is where I'm going with this. So in talking with this trusted program friend, what they gave back to me is that the cause of my suffering, especially around this particular situation, is that I wish things were different. And wishing things were different than they were is not acceptance. And as we learn in the big book of AA, if you're not familiar with it, one of the like real punchlines, like one-liner, and there's not one-liners, like it's a really, but it's heavy, is that acceptance is the answer to all of my problems today. So when I am not in acceptance, the cause of suffering is that I wish things were different. And around this particular relationship, this breakup, oh, do I wish things were different? Oh, gosh. Oh, I could feel that in my stomach. I wish things were different. And it feels good to say it out loud. It feels like coming clean, like it feels honest to say, I wish things were different. And so when this person gave this back to me, like this gift of like, what I hear you saying is that you wish things were different and that it's causing suffering and non-acceptance, like that really nailed it for me. Like this deep desire that I have, wishing that things were different, is really messing with me, because it's not allowing me to see the situation clearly, because I just wish it was different. I wish it was the way that it was, and I wish that we could be on the same page of where we wanted that relationship to go, and I wish he could change, and I wish I could change, and I just wish that things were different. And so I'm not accepting reality. I'm not accepting reality as it is. And so that just like shot me open into a new space. Like, holy shit, like I do wish things were different. And this is like the root cause of the suffering, is that I wish it was different. And it's not. It is the way that it is. And so this has just really opened me up. So I want to share something with you. I've been reading this book and I really like it. This is why Buddhism has been on my mind. It's called Recovery Dharma. And Recovery Dharma is actually a different recovery program. If you're interested, it's called Recovery Dharma. And I think they have meetings and stuff as well. So I picked up this book on Amazon for $6. And so it's really great. So the book is called Recovery Dharma, How to Use Buddhist Principles and Principles to Heal the Suffering of, How to Use Buddhist Practices and Principles to Heal the Suffering of Addiction. So I just so happened to be reading this book this week, and at the same time I had this conversation rolling around in my mind about wishing things were different. And it turns out that that's like basically the second noble truth. The first noble truth is there is suffering, and the second noble truth is the cause of suffering. So I'm going to read this to you because I truly couldn't say it better. And so just put yourself in a listening position. I like to close my eyes. Sometimes when I'm listening, it just helps me ground and center. So put yourself into listening mode for just a moment, and I'm going to read this to you. The second noble truth, the cause of suffering. Our refusal to accept the way things are leads to wanting or craving, which is the cause of suffering. We don't suffer because of the way things are, but because we want or think we need those things to be different. We suffer because we cling to the idea that we can satisfy our own cravings while ignoring the conditions of the world around us. Above all, we cling to the idea that we can hold on to impermanent and unreliable things that can't ever lead us to real satisfaction or lasting happiness, without experience the suffering of one day losing them. Clinging to impermanent solutions for suffering results in craving. We experience craving like a thirst, an unsatisfied longing, and it can become a driving force in our lives. If craving goes beyond simple desire, which is a natural part of life, it often leads us to fixation, obsession, and the delusional belief that we can't be happy without getting what we crave. It warps our intentions so that we make choices that harm ourselves and others. This repetitive craving and obsessive drive to satisfy it leads to what we now know as addiction. Addiction occupies the part of our mind that chooses our will and replaces compassion, kindness, generosity, honesty, and other intentions that might have been there. Many of us experience addiction as the loss of our freedom to choose. It's the addiction that seems to be making our choices for us. In the way we must have food, shelter, or water, our mind can tell us that we must have some substance, buy or steal something, satisfy some lust, keep acting until we achieve some needed result. That we must protect ourselves at all costs and attack people with whom we disagree or people who have something we want. This need also leads to an unsettled or agitated state of mind that tells us we'll only be happy if we get certain results or feel a certain way. We want to be someone we're not, or we don't want to be who we are. Conditions or circumstances in and of themselves don't cause suffering. They can cause pain or unpleasant experiences, but we add suffering on top of this when we think we need those circumstances to be different. We create even more suffering when we act out in ways that deny the reality of the circumstances and the reality of impermanence. Craving is the underlying motive that fuels unwise actions that create suffering. If you're listening to this on podcast, you don't know that I just dropped my jaw. Like, that's it. That's everything right there. Craving is the underlying motive that fuels unwise actions that create suffering. I had a craving this week. I had a craving to reach out to someone that I'm longing for because I can't accept that things are the way they are. I want them to be different. And that fuels unwise actions. Sending texts that I ought not be sending, unwise actions. And that causes greater suffering. I mean, this is just mind-blowing stuff, folks. I'm telling you. Like, this is the stuff that life is made of. And so after having that conversation and after reading that second noble truth in Recovery Dharma, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this is it. Like the root of this suffering is that I have this craving, this longing. And when that longing is not addressed, it turns to craving. And it turns to unwise behavior. And it creates my suffering. And once that came to the surface, like once I was able to see that, I could feel something in me shift. I felt some of the edge even more smooth out. Like, because being able to see that, being able to understand that the root, the cause of this suffering is not that I have pain. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. You know that saying? I don't have to suffer if I choose to accept reality, if I choose to see my situation clearly. And that just really, really helped. So if I can offer you that today, that the cause of suffering is wanting things to be different, wishing things were different. And if there's a situation that applies to you right now that you wish things were different and how that is causing additional, perhaps unnecessary extra suffering. So that's what I have for you today. The cause of suffering is wishing things were different. And if that resonates with you, then I understand. I get it. So, if you want to come to Y12SR sometime and talk about it, I would love to have you at the meeting. It's super fun. You could sign up on my website. Like I said, I'll put the link for that in the description and the show notes. It would be wonderful to have you. It would be wonderful to share recovery space with you. So consider that as a possible additional tool for your sustainable recovery practice. So with that being said, we're going to do a short flow. The flow is the intention, the theme is reality. Rather than wishing things were different, being with what is. And so as always, our practice is fueled by our breath. And so if you have a few moments, please join me on the mat. And if you don't have a mat, don't worry. You can do this wherever you are. It will be simple. Thank you for joining me for this practice. We'll begin on our back in supine butterfly. So make your way to your back. Lie down. Bring the soles of your feet to touch and let your knees just gently fall to the sides. Place your right hand over your heart and your left hand over your belly. If it's comfortable to you, close your eyes. And take a big breath. And just begin to notice your breath. Exactly as it is. Bare bones. Right here, right now. Not as we wish it to be, but as it is. Take one more big full breath. And empty it. Take a full body stretch. Lengthen your legs forward. Stretch your arms behind you and just stretch from fingers to toes. And then pull your knees in towards your body. Put one hand on each knee. So your knees are just stacked over your hips. And just take a few circles with your low back and the floor. And when it feels natural and right, you'll switch directions. Open your arms into a T. Let your arms rest on the floor. And just gently drop your knees over to the right. And turn your gaze to the left. Come back to center. Drop your knees to the left and turn your gaze to the right. And just notice how this twist feels in your body, exactly as it is. Not as we wish it were, but what's happening right now, right in this moment. And slowly come back up to center. Make your way up to a seat. Stretch your legs in front of you and pull your booty out from underneath you. So get a nice connection to the floor. Your legs are just straight right in front of you. Reach your arms up over your head and hinge forward to reach for your feet. Seated forward fold. Take a big breath in and out. Slowly sit up. Make your way to all fours, a tabletop position. Stack your wrists underneath your shoulders, your hips over your knees, and just take some rounds of cat-cow. Move your body exactly as it is. Notice exactly what there is to feel without wishing things were different. Just as you are right now. Move your body with your breath. Connect those two elements, your movement and your breathing. Just a couple more rounds. Come back to a neutral tabletop. Make your way to downward facing dog. Lift your tailbone to the sky. Swim around in your down dog a little bit. Just take a little gentle movement, sway your hips, bend one knee and then the other, pedal your legs out a little bit. Allow the crown of your head to fall towards the floor. Be with yourself exactly as you are. Acceptance of this moment. Pick your heels up off the mat, bend your knees deep, look forward, step to the top of your mat. Halfway lift, take a big breath in. Fold forward into ragdoll. Catch opposite elbow to opposite hand. Take your feet hip width distance or wider and allow the crown of your head to just fall towards the floor. Use the weight of your head and your arms to lengthen your spine. I like to sway from side to side. Take any movement here that feels true to you. Acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. Release your elbows. Put your hands on your hips. Press down and stand up. Reach your arms up over your head. Interlace all 10 of your fingers and flip your palms to face the ceiling. Take a big full body stretch. Take one more big breath. Bow forward with your exhale. Soften your knees. Bring your hands to the floor. Let your head fall. Halfway lift. Put your palms on your shins. Lengthen the crown of your head forward. Keep a flat back. Take a big breath in. Bow forward. Breathe in, reach up, high mountain pose. Look at your fingers, rise tall. Bow forward with your exhaled breath. Let your head fall. Halfway lift, lengthen your head forward. Bow forward, forward fold. One more like that. Breathe in, reach up. Bow forward with your exhale. Lengthen your spine. Bow forward. Stand back up. Reach your arms over your head. Pull your palms to touch at the center of your chest. Thank you so much, my friend, for joining me for this episode of Luminous Recovery Yoga Podcast. I hope to see you maybe in class someday. Until then, take care, and I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Luminous Recovery Yoga Podcast. If you'd like to support the show, please consider joining my Patreon or leaving a comment and review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or YouTube.